Hi, I'm Andre from Content, and today I'll tell you how to build fast and secure websites with Jamstack using .NET and how to deploy them to Azure Static Web Apps. Let's start with Jamstack. What is Jamstack and which benefits it actually brings to .NET developers? Jamstack is referred to by many names, including static sites, pre-generated sites, and so on, and people often think that they can only be generated using JavaScript and JavaScript frameworks. But the truth is, you can actually use any technology or framework you like. The idea is, you take content, you take templates, and generate as many files as you have content items. Those generated pages can sit on any static file hosting, or they can be distributed via global content delivery networks. Now, Jamstack doesn't care how you build the static files, as long as the output are the static files. But if you're working with .NET, you can use static site generator built for .NET, which is called Statiq. It provides a rich set of features and offers integrations with many tools, including the headless CMS content. So you don't need to worry about solving boring tasks like putting all the things together and configuring them, but you can start working on the actual website right away from the start. So how does Statiq work? Statiq comes with the concept of documents, modules, and pipelines. Document represents any source data item. In this case, it can be graph, it can be text, it can be user, or any other type of entity that is somehow represented on your website as content. Module, on the other hand, is responsible for transforming the documents, your data, into an output. Here you see that we're trying to transform textual documents into a single XML file that can be later imported by visitors of your site into their RSS readers. And finally, pipelines are responsible for chaining modules. You see, modules are typically reusable pieces of functionality. So in order to generate a PDF file like we're trying to do on this slide, we first need to resolve images and links, build the underlying structure in HTML, and only then we can convert the content into PDF. So pipelines are used for chaining modules and defining the order of modules. Now, the documents can come from various data sources. In this case, we're getting the content from the headless CMS Kaneko content because it features integration with Statiq and can provide all the content items from the cloud as documents. The way how it works is that Statiq on every build fetches the content from the headless CMS and executes all the pipelines it can find in the project. The output of every pipeline can vary, but in most cases it represents a file that is generated into the output bundle, into the bundle that is then deployed to the static file host. But let's get to code. Let's get to see how the Statiq implementation looks like. So first of all, let me show you the code repository on GitHub. You see the repository does not contain only the Statiq implementation, including the solution file, but it also contains a package called Kontent.zip that you can use to import data into the headless CMS. What you'll need for that is first account on the headless CMS, so you can go ahead and sign up if you haven't already. And once you have an empty project, this is the screen that you'll be looking at. We're going to import the content using Kaneko Content Template Manager, and for that we're going to need two API keys, which you'll find under Project Settings and API Keys. Now, the content package is in the repository, so we can go ahead and import the content using the project ID and the API key for management API. You first need to activate it and then copy the key. Well, we also want to publish all language variants after import so that we can directly work with content. Unpublished items are not present in the delivery API that we're used to consume content in the Statiq project. So I'm going to prepare for import and then import the data into my project. And once this is finished, you can go back to the project in the headless CMS and see all the content items are here. Now, this is the only thing we need to do so far in the headless CMS. Otherwise, we're just going to consume the content via the API. And let's take a look at how the solution looks like in Visual Studio. You see there's only one project, kentico.content.static.lumen, which contains all the code files of the Statiq site implementation. Now, I talked about documents, modules, and pipelines. Here we're going to take a look at the pipelines because there's only a single module. The fact that Statiq framework is very rich means that it comes with a lot of modules out of the box. So you typically use the ones that already are in the framework rather than creating your own. So what we're going to look at are the pipelines. Now you see that this website is quite advanced, or it already has a lot of use cases that need to be handled. So that's why there are a lot of pipelines. We can take a look at the homepage pipeline, or the home pipeline actually, where you'll see that each pipeline consists of three things. It's the input modules, process modules, and output modules. Now I'm gonna talk a bit more about them when we create a new pipeline here, but just so you know, the input modules actually define the documents that come into the pipeline. In this case, it's based on a dependency, so we're not getting any extra input here. But when we look at the posts pipeline, for example, you see that the input modules are actually getting data from the headless CMS. So that's the new content article delivery client. This actually gets all the articles from the headless CMS. This is the headless CMS SDK class. Now here you can define what kind of content you want to get in the pipeline. But I just wanted to show you this so you know how the documents actually make their way into the pipeline. So coming back to the home pipeline, you see that here we start with process modules, and the process module actually takes all the documents from the posts pipeline, it paginates them, and it reads index.cshtml file, which is essentially a razor file that defines the template of the output page and renders the razor with the data that we prepared. So when we look at the index.cshtml file, you're gonna see that this is a markup for a main page. So there is some content, there we display the articles, and that's it. There is nothing else here. Now let me build this site. I'm gonna generate it. I'm gonna show you how it looks like so that we can add some functionalities to it later. So I'm gonna run the site using .NET run and a flag preview so that we also get a server that serves the files. By default, if you just hit .NET run, it builds the site and it adds all the files in the output bundle that's under output folder of the project. If you add the flag preview, it will also start a web server that serves all the files that are within the output folder. Now let me show you that. So let's try it, .NET run with the flag preview. Okay, and now we can access the website under localhost and port 5080. So you see this is the generated website. It's a typical starter that we use for also other technologies. Here you see that there is an author, there are some articles here. You can also switch to night mode, and there are some additional items in the menu. When we go look at the article, there are also tags and categories that are just used to list all the articles in the specific category or that feature the same tag. Right now we have 5 articles on the website. What I want to do is, oh, this is not running anymore, okay. What I want to do is generate some articles as PDF files and offer them for download. So whenever a reader comes to the page, they're able to download a PDF file with the content. Now, in order to do that, I'm going to first adjust the content model on the headless CMS side so that we have a checkbox there that the author can decide whether the downloadable version should be available or not. So to do that, I'm going to jump into content model and I'm going to adjust the article content type. I'm going to add here a single multiple choice field. Let's add it under title. and call it downloadable. Now we're not going to make it required. It's going to be checkbox. And the option is going to be yes. And let's go back into content. Now here, I already have the draft version, so I'm just going to click yes, downloadable yes, and publish the item. I'm going to do the same with one more article so that we have at least 2 articles that we can work with. Upgrade it to Gatsby v2, for example. I'm going to create a new version, mark it as downloadable, and publish. Now it usually takes a few seconds before the fresh data make it to the CDN, but then we can work with it in the project. Now when we change the content model and underlying content types, what is going to happen is that our models that were generated from the headless CMS are no longer in sync with the headless CMS. So let's take a look at the article. You see that there are some additional data that we need for our site, but the article.generated.cs is actually one-to-one what we have in the headless CMS. So you see that there are some code names and some properties that actually correspond to the headless CMS content type. Now what we can do, we don't need to change it directly, but there is a tool that we can use to regenerate everything. It's using content model generator and connects to the headless CMS, downloads all the types, and actually regenerates the model classes. So I'm going to run this. And you see, once the content model generator runs, it rendered 16 content type models. So let's take a look at the article generated. And you see that there is a new IEnumerable multiple choice option downloadable. So we can use this to define which articles are going to be generated into PDF files. Now, in order to do that, I'm going to create a new Razor view, or I already created a new Razor view. So we're talking about articles, right? Articles are rendered using the post.cs HTML. So you see there is some markup around the article, and there is the publish date displayed, some code names and so on. There is the raw content rendered. Now for the PDF file, we obviously don't care about all the other attributes here. We only care about the specific content. So that's why I already created a new PDF post.cs HTML Razor view that only contains a bunch of HTML elements that make the content look nice, and displays only the raw rendered content. Now, before we can generate the files into PDF, we need to create a new pipeline. So I already went ahead and created a file called posts PDF pipeline. And you see it's completely empty. It's a single pipeline that contains input modules, process modules, and output modules. And the way how we're gonna handle this is we're gonna, for every article, we're gonna call an online service that is capable of transforming HTML files into PDF, and we're gonna get the file back and store it on our local. The input module is going to contain only a single line, which is going to be getting the content from the headless CMS, and we're gonna use delivery client. You see that we have the delivery client injected here in the pipeline, which is handled by the integration of content and Statiq. And we're going to use with query and use new depth parameter 1, which instructs the SDK to get us not only the article, but also the linked items in the first depth. In this case, I'm doing it so that I get also the author object and get the author's name. That's the only reason why I'm doing this. And actually, there's going to be another line. I'm just going to copy it over from another pipeline that is going to set the destination. In this case, we're actually saying where the PDF file should be stored. So in my case, I'm going to store it in the folder PDF / the name of or the slug of the article. So the same way we use the slugs to display the articles on the website, we're going to use the same path, but we're only going to store it as a PDF file. And that's all. That's all we need for the input modules. Now the output module is going to be very easy, and it's going to be pretty much the same as for every other pipeline, and it's going to be only new write files. This is a module from Statiq that takes all the documents that you provided to and stores it as physical files on the drive or in the output bundle. So that's how we're gonna set the output module. And in the process module, we're gonna have to take the HTML code, or we're gonna create the HTML code and generate it using the online service into PDF. So I'm actually gonna copy this code over and just go and explain every single step. So here we go. The first thing we need to do is merge content. What merge content does is it loads the Razor view from the file specified and uses that as a template. So we're going to use that. We're going to read the file from the PDF post CSHTML. Now Statiq automatically goes into the input folder for these types of files. So you only need to specify the name of the Razor view, and it's going to use that. The next thing is we need to provide a model for the Razor view. So the Razor view contains a model that we use to display the data, and here we need to generate the model. So I like to refer to pipelines as some sort of controllers. In the controller, you would also get the data from a service, from a data layer, and process the data so that it looks nice for your views. This is the same case. Here we're getting the Razor view, we're getting the data, and the data are coming from the articles that we just got from the headless CMS, right? So this is going to be repeated 5 times. And we're going to render, or we're going to create the view model. So we're using the post view model, and we're providing the article model here as the basis. And we're also creating a new site metadata object with the author of the article. That's because the layout that's around the whole PDF post view requires us to have an author there. So we're going to just provide it, and it's also required by the post view model. When we look at that, you'll see that there is an article and site metadata. So we need to provide both of these. And once this is done, we can actually go on with the conversion of the documents into the PDF. So what you see here is we're waiting for get content string async. This means we're actually waiting for the previous module. So you see this is render Razor. So we're actually combining the content with the template, and we're waiting for it to do its magic and give us the content string async. So here we actually get the whole HTML output of the view. So this would be something that we would store in the HTML file. But in this case, we want to generate a PDF. So we only take the content and we call the online service. So we're instantiating the HTTP client, we're providing the HTML and API key, and we are calling the API of HTML to PDF.app service. That is going to make sure we get the PDF as a response. Now you see that this is just the data JSON, so we need to convert it into a data format that the service understands, and we send it as HTTP content. The response, if that is actually a status, there is a success status code, the response gets translated back into a memory stream, and the memory stream we can then turn into a static file. So here you see that the context, this is a context of the Statiq framework, lets us create a document, and we only provide a source stream, so that would be here. We provide name of or identifier for the document, and we actually say that the destination file will have extension with .pdf. We also set up the media type, and we return the iDocument array with only this single document. So you see, we actually created a document, we processed it, And then we return, the end of the pipeline, the end of the module chain only returns the new PDF document that was created using Statiq. And once this is all done, the process modules is done. We go into output modules and we only write the files. And that's it, really. So all of this makes sure that we get all the articles as PDF files. Okay, now you see that the posts PDF pipeline is here. So we got 5 output documents. So we should already have the PDF files generated. Now let's take a look at the output folder. So this is the project. And here we can take a look at output. And you see that there are PDF files here. We have 5 PDF files currently. And when we open some of them, you see it doesn't look nice because we didn't add any style sheets there, but it's the content. And if everything went well, we should also see images. So let's take a look. This is some other document, and we also see images here. Now there's still one thing left to be done here, and that is incorporate the downloadable checkbox into our pipeline. So we don't need to actually generate all the PDF files, but only the files of content items or of articles that have this checkbox set to yes. Now we can do that by limiting the number of content items that we get from the headless CMS based on the downloadable checkbox. So we can adjust the with query here where we have the depth parameter. We can also add here contains filter. Contains filter because we're using a list. Yeah, there can be multiple options and we are looking only for the single one. Now here we need to type elements and add here the code name of the element. So in this case, it's going to be article.downloadable codename. And we are looking for a value yes. Now let's try to run this and see if we only get 2 PDF files generated. So I'm going to build the solution and run it. So you see the post PDF pipeline here only got 2 input documents, which is what we expected, and we should have only 2 files generated as PDFs. Okay, so you see this is the PDF folder. We only got 2 articles here. Now the last step is to actually adjust the post razor view so that we can get the download button only for the articles that have the downloadable field set. So we can add a link here right after the all articles. And when we adjusted the razor view, we can run the generator again and see if we actually get what we are looking for. So I'm going to build it again and run the build again. And you see that the server is now running at the same address as before, so we can take a look at the website. And when we look at one of the articles that is actually downloadable, is marked as downloadable, we should see the link here, download PDF. And you see that the link is not 100% correct, but we should be able to get that up and running. And when we look back at some article that is not downloadable, we don't see any PDF file there. So this is how it works. And now let's take a look at how to actually deploy this website into Azure Static Web Apps. So first of all, I'm going to take the whole code base, I'm going to deploy it to GitHub repository, and I'm going to make a cut here. Then we're going to take a look at how to connect the GitHub repository to the Azure Static Web Apps. So now we have all the code in a GitHub repository, so we can go ahead and create a new Azure Static Web App on the Azure portal. So I'm going to create a resource. Let's look for Static Web App and create one. So first of all, we need to provide some project details like a subscription and resource group, and then name our new static website. So let's call it Static Lumen. I'm going to use a free plan And because I'm in the Western Europe, I'm gonna select the Western Europe data center. Now we obviously wanna build the website based on code repository in GitHub. So I'm gonna sign in with GitHub. And select the repository that I just created. That is Statiq starter content lumen Azure. Now the branch is main, and we need to provide some build details. Now, if you're trying to deploy a site based on Gatsby, Vue.js, and others, it's easier because there are already presets available. In case of Statiq, we have to create our own. So we're going to go with custom, and I'm just going to delete all of these. Oh, this is a requirement. All right, so let's keep the slash here. But I want to explain to you what is actually happening here. So the Statiq web apps is just the deployment place, right? You can only put the Statiq bundle onto this host. So what this is actually going to do is going to create a GitHub Actions workflow that will be responsible for building your website. And once the website is completely built, there is an action that will take the bundle and deploy it on the Azure Statiq web app. The important thing here to know is that before that actually happens, before the deployment happens, and once the Statiq website builds, the whole app is in the output folder. So here it says application, and the information tells you location of your application code. Yeah, the slash represents the root of your app. But in this case, the app that we want to deploy is actually the already built app, the output bundle, which is in the folder output. Yeah, so this is a bit misleading. So I'm just going to put here output and leave the rest as it is. Now, when I click review and create, it's going to show me the review. Then I'm going to create the resource. And once the resource is created, it's going to create the workflow on the GitHub repository side. Yeah. The problem is it doesn't know that we're using Statiq, so we're going to have to adjust the GitHub action. Now, the deployment is complete. When we go back to our GitHub repo, we should see GitHub workflow. And there is the workflow created by Azure Statiq Web Apps. And we're going to change this a bit because you see there is no information about .NET. And we first need to run .NET restore, .NET build, and then we need .NET run, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and edit this file. I already have the right one, so I'm just going to copy and paste this. Now you see what happens here is on the build and deploy job, we are invoking .NET version 5.0. We're running .NET restore, we're running .NET build, and we're running .NET run. And once this all happens, we get the output bundle in the folder output. Then we can run the Azure Statiq Web Apps deploy, and we tell it that the application is in output. Yeah. All right. Now let's commit this file. And just remember that when you do the same, there are two secrets, this one and this one. Those are the same, but they have a unique identifier. So you have to actually wait for Azure to create this file so that you know how the secret is called. And you need to replace these secrets with the ones that you have in the fixed file. Now, when this happens, we can go back to actions and we can actually see the build happen. So you see that this is the latest one. It's going to take about 2 minutes. So I'm going to fast forward here and we're going to see the result. All right, so you see that the build went through. Let's switch back to the Azure portal. You see the deployment is complete. And when we go back to the overview, we can go to resource. And now we can browse our new app, which is here. And you see, we can go ahead, open the articles, everything is working. Obviously, the PDF files still have the wrong links, but they should all be there. So this is how easily you can deploy the Statiq app using the GitHub Actions to Azure Statiq Web Apps. And that's the end of this use case. So I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, feel free to talk to me either on Twitter or take a look at the articles on my site. If you're interested in the headless CMSs and in content, there is a QR code that will give you 2 extra months of a full feature trial. So feel free to use it to sign up for the headless CMS. And you will find all the codes for this sample and for the GitHub action workflow on my GitHub, which is github.com/ondramas, the same handle. I'm using it everywhere. So thanks for your attention, and I hope to talk to you soon.